we can go ahead and call to order. And I'm invoking the continuity of government ordinance for Albemarle County. We're operating under those rules today. So have a hybrid meeting with some participants here physically in Nelson County branch, and some are joining us remotely. So thank you everyone and welcome. Okay, so the first thing on our agenda is to bring up the policy 2.2 staff training, which we had been discussing at our last meeting. And I think we had, this group left it is we were pretty comfortable that we brought forward everything we wanted, that we could think of. And David was bringing it back to staff or managers for their feedback.
Yes, and I got two pieces of feedback, both from the same manager. One is that the training manual is actually referred to as the training plan. So I think we can go ahead and make that change. If no one objects. I guess I'll have to put that in green for the board. And the second was we had specifically asked managers whether or not or the policy committee talked about whether or not we wanted to include a line about a library degree scholarship to encourage pursuit of a professional degree, because we have a lot of procedures about that, but it's not written in the policy anywhere, and the staff was supportive of that inclusion. So that was all the feedback that we got from library managers.
Okay, so from the group here, then are we ready to recommend this to the full board? Or do we have any final discussion or tweaks?
Mike, I'm sorry, can we take a sec and back up and just for the rest of the board, welcome Camille to the policy committee.
Yes, welcome Camille.
Hi, thank you.
I've been in this other group with Camille, so I'm used to seeing her on the screen.
And we lost Ophelia Payne, longtime policy committee member, and Camille is stepping up to the plate.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
So I'm sure, Camille, you went back and watched all the previous taped policy committee meetings.
I did go back to where you suggested regarding the one we're discussing today, but no, I did not watch all of the taped policy meetings.
The only other thing that, I'm sorry, Tony, go ahead.
I don't think it's possible to binge watch policy committee meetings. That is something that
The only other thing that was kind of under discussion, as I recall, from this group was, we talked quite a bit about this last comment here. Jenny was making the point 2 months ago that JMRL would allow people to attend the conferences of professional organizations, even if they weren't a member and eligible for the member discounts. And so there was some question about whether or not we wanted to spell that out here. I think it's okay to leave that as a procedural thing, but that was on the table as well.
Okay, and I think where we had left it was procedural, as you're suggesting, that again, wanted to get managers to weigh in, and it doesn't sound like we had a wave of support for putting that at a policy level.
Yeah, I think that most managers were comfortable with the edits as we proposed them.
Okay, so are we ready to recommend this to the full board and move on?
I think so.
All right, great, thanks everyone. Okay, next we have group visits, which we had started discussing last month as well. And so if I recall, where we got to was we want people to visit the library and use our services. Sometimes they want to come in groups, and there's just some trade-offs there in terms of we want to make sure we welcome that, but that we for our own purposes have some ability to anticipate that if there's a surge in demand, we need to be able to match that with staffing, or in some cases we may need to limit if it just doesn't, or kind of moderate that, you know, to sort of do some traffic control in terms of when we can't have, you know, multiple groups in one day just with staffing. So there'll be some scheduling involved potentially. So there's questions of what do we define as a group visit? And then I think, I forgot if this was part of the meeting discussion, but I know David and I talked about a little bit the concept of, does a group visit want a sort of what I would call a dedicated service, like a tour, or hey, we're all going to need cards today, or are they just visiting as a group to, you know, access the library on their own without needing dedicated services necessarily, although there would still be a kind of a traffic issue if everybody's checking out a book. So those I think those are the questions that were on the table. Does anybody else have other, just by way of reviewing where we were, other topics that we were talking about?
Chris had suggested that we look at the library visit request form.
Yes.
And I did look at that, and it's not asking, it's just basically asking like, what can we help you with when you are in the library? Oh, Krista, where did we hide that?
If you go to programs, kids, over on the right-hand side, it says library visits below 1,000 books before kindergarten and World Book early learning. And I'm wondering, we should have it in some other spots too, so I'm double checking.
Yeah, right, 'cause it's not just for kids.
So I did notice this, if you scroll down, David, keep going. There's a list of possible requests.
And it is under adult programs also, so it's under for adult groups also.
Okay.
Thank you.
But these are sort of the possible, what I would call dedicated service that we're maybe offering or suggesting. So tours, and then there's some special kind of instructions for ebooks, research. Although I noticed these aren't all for visits necessarily.
No, like some of them are asking, do you want us to come to you?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also seeing which the festival or event would be in that category as well, right?
Right.
We would be doing.
This is a combination of kind of outreach and visits.
Yeah.
Things that would require staff time in order to serve a specific organization, basically.
Right. Okay, so back to the text, maybe. What needs to be different? Is it what needs to be different in order to strike these balances that we're trying to accomplish?
Were
Jenny.
school visits included, are they included in this policy? So like we sometimes do go to other organizations and provide a library introduction of our services and stuff. But school visits are kind of a big category of things that we do. You know, we do registrations for events at schools and stuff like that. Should that be in here?
It's a good question. I mean, I kind of think my initial gut instinct is that those are well organized between the school and the staff at the library. You know, the school doesn't show up unannounced at the library, you know, like they would. It depends, like I guess what I'm thinking about, like
They have.
I'm thinking about Nathaniel Green Elementary School, like Greene County Schools, basically. Like they can't, you know, if they're gonna come to the library, they need to organize a lot of stuff in advance in order to happen. But I guess if you had a private school, I think this is intended to cover daycares, you know, other groups that have children there, you know.
Or smaller groups in schools come, like special education students come frequently to Greene. They're a small group, they probably less than 10, but.
And the teacher brings them. And do they schedule that in advance?
It's more informal because they come once a month. They were before the pandemic, but we initially did schedule it.
So that's similar to
Yeah,
Ophelia's discussion about the group homecoming. Yeah.
Yeah, we have stuff like that in Greene too. And they didn't always schedule either, but they were definitely less than 10. Yeah, okay, so I was just wondering if school visits would be
So I guess my question would be, so yes, I would think of school, if they're coming to the library, that's a group, just like any other group, because they're gonna be
Oh, Kathy's here. Okay.
looking at the shelves and checking out books and so forth.
Wasn't one of the questions whether the number of 10 or more should be lower?
Yeah, we got feedback from a branch that wanted a lower number.
And we wanted 5, I think, was that right?
Yeah.
And I can see that because depending on the branch, 10 people could be, you know, in Scottsville or even in Gordon, 10 people coming in all at once when you weren't expecting them. You know, I think 5 that's a group. For our meeting rooms, 3 is a group. But as you said, David, too, you could have a family.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I could
obviously,
bring my family in and it's 6 people.
yeah.
Even at Central, you know, if you do have a private school class come in and each student has a different research topic and they just show up and they need assistance from staff and they have 5 intensive reference questions all at the same time, that's almost as much of an impact as, you know, a larger group coming to do.
And we do
less.
get that from a local private school.
Mm-hmm.
Does the 10 include the supervisor of the group? Because I think maybe we need to indicate that there is a supervisor and maybe some of this that's falling on the librarian will be eased if we have 10 kids and a supervisor or teacher.
Somebody in charge, basically.
Yes. So is that person included in the 10?
Probably, as it's currently written, it just says 10.
Okay.
I would suggest trying to combine the number with the type of service they're asking for. So maybe saying something like a group visit defined as 5 or 10, whatever you decide, or more people participating in activities that require special attention or special support from library staff, maybe.
I think something along those lines gets to the crux of it here, because I want to make sure everybody understands that if that group comes in, nobody's telling them you can't come in the library. You know, they certainly are welcome to come in. Nobody has to make an appointment to use the library unless we're in tier 3 of library services. So I think we need to make sure that we get that distinction across, that this is for if you're going to require, and I know having a group of 10 walk in puts pressure on staff just because they're going to have to answer run-of-the-mill questions, but I don't want this to end up being a document that says we're turning people away from the library.
Yeah, I do think that distinction, right now, I think what it says is we're requiring you to notify us in advance if it's more than 10 people showing up at once. And I do think there's probably a distinction where sometimes we might encourage you to let us know in advance to help us plan. And then other times we might require, if you're needing this sort of dedicated service. So I guess if we do agree on that, and if so, then we can
Yeah, I think
try to figure
that's
out wording.
Camille, does that kind of get to your point as well?
Yep.
So maybe just under defined as 10, and maybe we could just add some words to what the definition is.
It says we welcome visits, and then we require stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And I wonder if Kathy's question, if that's the case, if it's with kids, or if that's the case with adults too. Like if an adult learning class came in, would we still want to have somebody I guess we would want somebody as the person in charge, but again, we're not turning anybody away if they show up.
Most people understand that if they want some intensive staff attention, they should let you know up front. It's really rare for anybody to really need a lot of attention and not have call.
I think that this happens in the summertime, maybe for regional programming.
Yeah.
When there's limited space and large groups will come in and take up a lot of space. And so I think
The last 2 sentences are great for that.
Yeah, I think this is a definition issue here. And I'm almost, wondering if just the phrase group visit is the problem. Maybe there should be a dedicated, something like a different concept. It's a dedicated group visit.
For a
There's-
pre-planned visit.
Yeah, there's some kinds of group visits where we ask you to, communicate to coordinate in advance. And there's certain other kinds of group visits, drop-bys or whatever, where we just encourage you to give us a heads up. So maybe, I'm sort of wondering if just that word group visit, there needs to be two, if we're drawing a distinction, maybe that the distinction should be in the phrase with some sort of adjective.
Do you mean like in the title, like this policy is not called group visits?
We group visits, but then we go on to have two different phrases for the two different concepts we're talking about.
Just realized this doesn't make any sense here. This sentence is just hanging there.
Yeah.
Group visit, find 10 more people,
Just define.
period.
Yeah, I think that would work, Mike, to have a second sentence and say, a dedicated group visit requiring,
Yeah.
I don't know how to say, it, more than normal staff attention, should be scheduled.
Like a purposeful or a,
And
Formal, I don't know, formal group visit requiring additional staff attention or support.
yeah.
So where would that go? In the beginning?
I like the first sentence as it is, because we like to welcome. So I'm just going off the cuff here. Then there'd be kind of two almost bullet points or two sections covering the two different kinds of group visits that we still don't have a great name for.
I was going to suggest that too. I mean, just a paragraph break, if nothing else. But I mean, I like the bullet points for the two different kinds.
I like bullet points.
And maybe we don't even need a definition. We could say something like when 10 or more people are visiting with a purpose that might require dedicated staff assistance, comma, then we ask that you fill out the form in advance.
Or you might want to say a smaller number of people for that.
Yeah, right,
visit.
yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Just put a
Yeah.
link. Can we just do that?
something like this. You can probably redo this better, but, and then take out the defined as. And then I would say dedicated service might involve, like, so the group visits may include that. Those, to me, those are sort of, we're getting at what are these special.
Do we need, this is just a bug in my brain, do we need something that says that these people are visiting together?
Sure.
10 or more people are visiting together,
We have to reword this whole thing, but,
may require, maybe not.
When a group of 10 or more.
Thank you.
and then I would go on to say examples might be,
This
and
could
then
be a
something
new-
like that. Well, this is part of the same.
A new paragraph though?
I would bullet where you started with the red and then include this in that bullet.
Yeah, I think this goes after the defining what group visits are. And then this is more of a specialized type of group visit, more likely library instruction.
So you're saying the group visits may include would be part
Yeah,
of the
because, yeah, I
part of the
think,
first sentence?
yeah, the definition goes first, and then this is kind of a special case of a group visit. And I would
Yeah.
make that less than 10 people,
Yeah.
because in some branches, as
Yeah.
Camille was saying, 5 students that all have a different project coming from one school.
So you could split it and say small branch versus large branch. I mean, 5, I'm just observing 5 might be the right number at some branches, but Crozet, maybe
Oh, yeah.
10 is okay.
It depends on any given day.
Yeah, and
Do
what
we
time,
need to-
and what time of day, I'm
And how
sure.
many people
Do we need to put a number? Can we just say when a group of people are visiting that may require dedicated services? But I mean, that could be 2 people though.
I mean, you really want to encourage managers to look at this on, can we do this and not have people saying, okay, this is more than 5, we cannot do this. You
Yeah,
don't
I agree
want
with that.
people to
Yeah,
be
we don't
worried
want this to be discouraging either to the public or to staff. We don't want the directive here to be, we're saying no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The answer is almost always yes.
Yeah, so what are our goals here? And I think a lot of this comes down to that last sentence. Oh, I don't know what I just did. Comes down to that last sentence. I mean, I think the original goals of this, when it was first written, probably had to do with the fact that there were some groups kind of monopolizing programming. But I also feel like, we want to leave this broad enough that that can be handled by that branch, between that branch and that group,
Exactly.
without alienating
Exactly.
anyone else.
I think we need to change the sentence then that says the library requires advanced notification. Because up at the front, we say we ask for it. We ask they fill out the form, and then down below, we say we require it, and that would be a reason a manager would turn people away. I wouldn't want that to happen, but I think we're not being consistent.
I like that better, Krista, because really, if a group doesn't schedule in advance and it's a problem, they're going to figure out right away that it doesn't work. It's not your fault because they didn't schedule it with you, and they're not going to do that again.
Right, and so you just say, today is not really going to work, but let's schedule another time. I think most branch managers would use some discretion. If it's quiet and they think they can handle it, great. But if they're down a staff person and there's a program happening and, they just can't fit it in, then they would say, you know what, you're welcome to look around today, but for what you're asking, we're going to need to make us, another visit.
Exactly. I like that a lot better.
So I think we need to work on some flow here. So can we try, as Jeannie suggested, move the group visits may include, that's group visits, that one just right after on the very top, not as a bullet. Okay, so now it's a little bit more of a definitional thing.
That's better.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like that.
Okay, and then underneath the bullet, that's basically duplicated by the bullet.
You can just get rid of that sentence.
I mean, you could put the positive library experience into the bullet as a little bit of a justification. You just need to merge this with the first bullet somehow.
I think if you just tack on to ensure a positive library experience at the end of the bullet and then get rid of the rest of that sentence that's in the paragraph, that might work.
And I would like to call the link library visit request form instead of that link.
Is that gonna work? Is this link, I mean, I would be in favor of spelling it out, like this is the actual link. We could get it changed, but like, if for whatever reason somebody couldn't click right on it, they could type in that URL.
Yeah, because it says outreach as opposed to visit. Maybe we could say library visit request form and then have the link also. I don't know.
When you point to it.
I think that's what we've done in the
usually-
past, Krista. Yeah, when you roll over it, it should say.
Yeah, in general, I think a lot of these links could be renamed better. So I'm in favor of being able to change the link out without the text. So in other words, I'm in favor of Krista's approach.
You might also be handing somebody a paper copy of this if
Yeah,
their group came into the library and you're trying to help them, and it seems like it'd be better if they made an appointment. So having it spelled out in that case would be good.
I mean, that's maybe what I was trying to get to. If they get a paper copy of it, then I'd rather have it spelled out.
Yeah, so then on the sentence where you've got the cross out there,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
you could get rid of the to ensure a positive library experience and just say the library requests advanced notification of group visits, and the library reserves the right to schedule, blah, blah, blah. The rest of it's good.
I don't even know if we need that. Isn't that covered? The back part of this sentence, isn't that covered in the red above?
I mean, it's always good if people let you know.
Yeah, I think you could say, both.
Where does that form go to, Krista?
What do you mean? That's a good question. I think it
Gets
goes
it.
to Sarah. It goes to the programming committee people.
So, you know, it's likely that a lot of this would happen over the phone. Somebody would call Ginny and say, hi, I'm calling from Bright Stars, or Molly, you know, I'm calling from this organization. We want to bring kids at 2 today. And are we then really going to ask them to go fill out the form, which is going to go to the programming committee, and then the programming committee calls Ginny?
They forward it to the branch that they're wanting to visit. And whether it's youth or adult. I'm assuming, like I said, David, this was set up earlier, but I'm assuming this goes to the head of reference, the young adult, and the children's person.
So how about this? To ensure a positive library experience, get that whole sentence, put it at the front of the bullet. Because we're just introducing the general concept that we'd like to hear from you in advance. And then we mention the form, you know, under what circumstances should we do the form? Or you could say the group visits form will help. I don't know. Do you want to require that form? I think I'm hearing that we don't always have to require it. So it's sort of, what I'm suggesting here is that we mention it as a supplemental way to help notify us.
Is that going to be a problem, Krista, for like Central Children's? Because they want to avoid, you know, a bunch of people calling maybe during the height of summer reading, you know, an hour before the program. But I also don't, you see, we've got two kind of competing things here. I don't want somebody not to be able to call Ginny and say, hey, we want to come in tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think people know they can call.
I mean,
Certainly.
Central Children's used to have a log of, you know, and actually their own paper form for when we got phone calls with requests like these. I don't know if they.
So we
still
knew how many
do
groups
that.
to expect, yeah. For summer reading, for the big programs.
And even for requests for class visits or for preschool visits, same thing.
Well, I think we'd have to run this by Tim and Angela regardless.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. And I think that this is a pretty good, I like this, but we might need some feedback here. So the outstanding issues are 10, is 10 the right number? And then Kathy's point about,
Supervisor.
do we need to include, you know, like somebody has to be in charge of the group?
Great. And do you come up with different numbers for different branches, or do we stick with one size fits all? From a flow standpoint, I would take out the bullet at this point because we didn't do two. We kind of didn't. We merged it into one part. So
Why is this not aligned with that?
10 is a lot of people. A smaller number of people can have a big impact on a small branch.
Sure, yeah.
We say 5 to 10 people, and then that gives some flexibility, or is that too mushy?
I just feel then the people with 11 people are gonna be.
I just say more than 5, 5 or more. And again, this isn't a family, this isn't a, you know, it's, they're asking for something special.
Yeah.
I kind of, not to confuse the issue, but I think that one of our goals in moving these things around was to say that this is only when you're asking for special circumstances, and I think we lost that flow. That doesn't happen until after we say we're requesting advance notification of group visits. So what would it look like if we switched, oh jeez. If we started this paragraph with when a group of 10 or more people are visiting, they may require. Do you hear what I'm saying?
I think the way it reads right now, we are requesting your advance notice, which we kind of want, even if it's just people showing up. It would be nice to know that. But then we're not using the word requires anymore, but we're sort of saying, hey, we additionally want the form under these circumstances.
Okay.
But you could move it to 5, change it to 5.
Well, I don't know. It's so hard to. The different branches are so different, you know, in terms of the number of staff that they have on hand, and of course. I mean,
Yeah.
even at Crozet, they have way more staff than we do, but they also have way more business than we do. So in fact, you know, it might be about the same.
And I think it also depends on what the need is. If someone's bringing in 5 people, I think about Krista, like this morning we were talking about the group in the Madison room, you know, the IRC, where sometimes a tutor will bring in a family and kind of walk them around and show them services. And they might ask some questions and they might get some cards, but basically they're not asking for anything more than what the library provides to anybody who walks through the door, and there might be 5 or 6 of them.
So partly the supervisor sounds like they're
Somebody is facilitating
filling that role.
Yeah,
Yeah,
back to Kathy's point, yeah.
The idea that you have to have a dedicated library staff member for the entire time of the visit, from the minute they walk in the door to the minute they leave. I don't know how to phrase it.
That's the distinction. What about for the 10, just softening it up a little bit and say something like when a group, parentheses, generally 5 or more people, close parentheses. So now we're saying general, the point being generally means it's no longer a hard and fast limit. We're just sort of trying to convey the concept that
That's pretty good.
I'm reasonably happy other than the supervisor question.
And I left this as a spelled out URL. Is that a deal breaker, Krista?
No, I'm sure the branch managers will let you know if it is. And the children's managers.
It's not a deal breaker for me either, but I don't prefer it just because I think websites can generally change around and then you don't want to have to go back to policy to.
Yeah, but I really feel,
Yeah.
I like Camille's point there. This is the type of thing that we would have, if there was some sort of problem with a group.
Yeah, your name.
And staff was saying, next time can you call? And they say, well, why do I need to do that? This is the type of thing that might get handed.
I thought she was talking about handing out the form itself, but, you know.
No, we don't have a paper version of that form, I don't think. I think that's electronic only, which is another issue.
Yeah, but some branches made up their own form, as Camille is saying, that, you know, there's a way they keep track.
And then in the 3rd paragraph, is there any perceived conflict for people reading this between what it says in the 2nd paragraph and the 3rd?
What do you think that conflict is?
Well, So we're requesting it in paragraph 2. In 3, we're saying we do reserve the right to schedule.
I think that's okay.
I think if I were reading it from scratch, I would read the third part as saying, well, if I show up with my group, the library might have to kind of ask me to do something different, which is similar to some of the comments I feel like Krista was saying. And it's just sort of a heads up about that might be necessary. But then I think I would read it by saying, well, if I fill out the form, it's going to help prevent that. I think what I was hearing is you do want this last part, you do want to have the ability, although we don't prefer to use it, you want to have the ability to do some traffic management.
That's true.
So we need to have, I think if you need that tool, then we need to mention it somewhere.
Does that need to be a capital L? Libraries group visits. Okay.
I think it's better.
Yeah, I think it's good. So could we maybe bring this back for a review?
I'll get manager feedback.
Manager feedback?
Yeah, I think we should.
The only thing left hanging was Kathy's suggestion.
Can you put a comment on that? Just to remember it. And you could ask it that way, but I think it would also play into kind of along the lines of what Tony was saying. It's going to the presence or absence of a supervisor is going to impact whether how much dedicated service they need. So it would be more to me about putting it in somewhere into that definition.
So suggestion there.
I don't know. It's just basically, do we want to invoke this point about supervisors or not?
I don't, but I think we can discuss it with the managers and see. I'm thinking about a guy that brought a group of UVA nurses, and he was a nurse, but he was bringing a group of adult student nursing, group here and he needed the tour just as much as they did. It wasn't like he was really supervising them. He just organized them and brought them to the room and said, hey, and we definitely considered him part of the group as opposed to a supervisor. They were all adults, but I'm sure the managers will sort it out.
We did have a group home that was visiting regularly in Green, and they were a problem because they were intellectually handicapped adults and they needed a lot of help. And the supervisor that came with them would get on the computer and do her own personal work and completely ignore them. And that was a problem for us.
I think that's been a problem regardless of the group. We've seen problems with camps that would do that with kids, or if that's a problem, then I think that the manager can address that directly.
Yeah, there's a group of teens that visit here at night with the supervisor.
So I would say if we invoke the concept of a supervisor, what I'm hearing is some supervisors are actively supervising and some kind of are not. So that makes a difference.
Neither here nor there. Yeah.
Well.
I think that would be more like the group that you mentioned, Jenny. Did they tend to schedule in advance?
No, that kind of devolved. Originally they did, and then they were coming on a certain day every other week or something. And
I think if staff knows in advance this group is coming at this time, then they can better prepare. Like, how can we make this work so that the kids are getting, or whoever is getting, what they need?
It didn't really work very well because they didn't have the help that they needed from their supervisor, but we couldn't do anything about that. Really.
Yeah.
This is not a good situation, but they eventually stopped coming, which was too bad for the people.
Okay, it sounds like David and Krista have what they need to discuss with managers.
Yeah,
and
I
then
think we can move this forward.
We'll get that. We will get that next.
So Mike, if there's very little feedback or nothing that needs to really majorly change,
Yeah.
we could potentially have the board read on this off month, in November.
Yes. Okay. I think it's a great point. Okay. So is this group ready then? If there's no significant feedback from managers or if they're reasonably supportive here, are we ready to recommend this to the board? Yeah, are we ready to move forward if there's nothing new comes up in the meantime?
I would say yes.
You say yes, or do we want to think about it? Do we ourselves want to think about it and bring it back up?
That's good.
I don't know Kathy, where are you with this, as we've had this discussion about the supervisor concept?
I'm fine.
You're fine either way?
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay, so we'll say, unless there's any objections right now, that we will read this in November, initially read it with the board, assuming that there's no further substantive feedback. If we do have substantive feedback, then this group will look at it in December.
Should that be registering 4 library cards up there?
Where's that?
Registering 4 library cards.
Okay, great. Okay, so we want to, I think, look at emergencies next. And these, by the way, some people probably realize this, but these aren't just chosen at random. We review every policy every 10 years. And so there's a stack that's up for review this year. And we're getting close to the end of that stack, actually, which is nice, because we're also getting close to the end of the year. But that's why we're bringing this one up. And if we have 5 minutes at the end here, I'll sort of just review where we are for December and what's left in this year. Okay, so this is the first time that this group has pulled this open. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And
Very short.
it's very short. I always like to ask, what's the point of having this? What is this policy? What's the purpose of it? Why do we need it? I think and especially with something like this, generally speaking, this is just at the board level policy, giving the director some guidance or priorities. Because this, obviously, if there's an emergency, it's going to be implemented it's going to be dealt with by the staff on hand. We're not going to have trustees parachuting in their vehicles with sirens, right? So this is it's something that's happening. It's where the rubber meets the road by staff. So what do we need to tell? I guess I'm trying to frame this as the question for the policy committee is, what do we need to tell the director and staff about what we need them to be, what guidance we need them to have for emergencies? Do you agree with that framing, David? Do you like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Mike and I briefly talked about this a few weeks ago, and I think the point that you made was a good one, that I think the board would want to ensure that the staff do have appropriate dedicated information about what to do in emergencies, in the sense that we have these emergency manuals that include schematics for the buildings and things like that. So I think this would be an appropriate place for the board to say, hey, staff, make sure you've got up-to-date information.
Staff shall have or maintain an emergency plan. I think that would be go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say there is, a piece in the handbook, which in theory we're holding staff accountable for reading and adhering to, that says that each branch has an evacuation route and procedure and an emergency action plan and where that can be found.
Okay. I agree to that. I think this is the place for the board basically to tell me, you need to make sure that that's correct information.
Well, that, but I think based on.
I
Go ahead,
also,
Kathy.
I also feel that one of the things that needs to happen too with this emergency plan, the director should have a copy of everybody's plan and it should be updated each year.
Reviewed or updated, yeah. And then the word I was going to add based on Camille's comment is training. You should not only, the director should not only have the plans, but ensure that staff are trained.
What is it called? What is the actual term for it, Camille?
Let's see. Emergency action plan.
This is gonna be too long. I'm just trying to get all that information in there.
Yeah, and on the intranet, it's called emergency manual, and then for each branch, there's an emergency evacuation map.
So we have 3 different names for this.
Mm.
What's the actual title of the doc? These do need to be updated because we had to update, Nelson's.
Under manuals, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is emergency action, as Camille said. Oh, fun with watching other people open files. Emergency action.
Oh, so we need to change it on the intranet, so Sarah needs to, yeah,
Yeah, that should change. Can you make a note of that, please?
yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the gist of what we would like to include here is that we want to make sure that this policy directs staff to have and maintain these branch emergency action plans, and then also to train on these. And Kathy, just for your own peace of mind, that is something that generally happens at the at the branch level in-service days. Generally, we do try to incorporate some training on either emergency procedures or the specialized plans for that building.
Okay, but I still have a question. Are we going to add that and be submitted to the director?
The training?
No, the manual, the emergency plan, the action plan.
Yeah, I think the plans themselves are the responsibility of the administration. So I don't think like Jenny doesn't come up with Green's plan, I'll come up with it and then she'll have a chance to review it and make sure that I don't mislabel anything, but I think.
The reason I indicated that is you all talked about having a map and having the rules and everything. With the climate of this country now, if somebody should enter the library and do something that is awfully terrible and I don't want to think about it, if the director is not aware of what's going on, how can he support the people that are involved? So that was, and maybe I'm off in my thinking, but I think it's really important that it be housed. It's all right if you come up with your plan for your library, but I think it's important that somebody else knows it so that they can hand it to the fire department, they can hand it to the police department. These are just my fears from having worked with a large group of people. We need to be safe.
So maybe if we change that to say the library administration should have and annually review and maintain branch emergency action plans. We do have them in 3-ring binders, but I don't think, like when we updated Nelson's, I think it only got updated online, not in a physical format. So we would need to, make sure there are copies there. Every branch is supposed to have a physical copy, but I think the online one probably would supersede that. So I need to think about that, how best to get that out there. Okay. That makes sense. This is a horrible sentence here, and I don't think it conveys any of what Kathy was trying to say, but
Well, I think wordsmithing, you can take out the word have. Just maintain implies have. Yeah.
think this is probably a separate sentence, right?
Yeah. And then I'll put switch, maintain, and review. Because the review is annual. It's a maintain and annually review. Yeah.
Okay, so are we willing to? I do think that we should codify that training needs to happen annually, but that's not something that's in the training plan as far as I'm aware. There's an offering for it, but not a requirement. So we could make a requirement that branch in-service days dedicate some amount of time to review of the emergency action plan.
It's a good idea.
I mean, most branches do that,
Yes.
but maybe not everyone.
During the pandemic, we haven't, so it's kind of hard to remember, but.
So at the policy level, I think I might just say administration shall ensure that staff are trained. And then if you're going to do that at your in-service, great. But we just need the result.
Agreed.
Yeah,
How does that sound?
I like that too. I think that makes sense.
And I think you can probably make that just a comma, you know, you're going to maintain annual review and ensure staff is trained.
Camille, how does that sound for you? If you're planning the branch in service day next year, that you would incorporate training on the local emergency action plan?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And, you know, part of the emergency action plan is the equipment that we have in the building, like the AEDs and the fire extinguishers and all that. And so, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Who's gonna tell AJ that he has to do this?
Well, he used to be the business manager. I think the branch manager has equal responsibility at least.
Yeah, I think as the facilities operator, he needs to know, like, it'll be his and my responsibility to make sure that when, for example, this building, when there's a change physically in the building, that we get the appropriate specs for the new space. But to Kathy's point, like, that doesn't always happen, you know, if one of the jurisdictions might come in tomorrow and move one of your fire extinguishers and I might not hear about it, so we need good two-way communication on that. That's pretty good though.
Okay, do we need feedback on this? What are our next steps here?
Probably.
Kathy, are you satisfied that administration covered the wording here? Administration covers what you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so same, and then is this the same deal? We could read this in November, barring substantial feedback?
Yeah, I would think that there's a better chance that this one would, it's so short, go through.
Okay. Okay, we just have 5 minutes. What's left for this year are a couple things. There's a staff training and vehicle use, and the thinking has been, no, I'm sorry, not staff training. Vehicle use and parking are sort of day-to-day operational stuff that has been described in the employee handbook, which is almost official. And so the thinking was to potentially deprecate those. So we'll bring that up next month, looking at the handbook and then side by side. And then I'm going to ask the question, do we need these to be policies anymore? Or can they move to a procedural level? So that's just by way of heads up for next month, for next meeting in December. We have, and then remaining this year, we have, and I think similarly with the ethics policies, David, we have to come up with a plan for that. That seems to be, that's on this list for 2021. But
They are official policies now. We just need to decide whether or not to keep them as official policies or do the same.
yeah, so, okay, so I put that in that same category of discuss in light of now that we have this more detailed employee handbook, these 4 policies, what should we keep them as policies or do something else? There's an interlibrary loan, which we didn't get to today, but that would be the next. And again, I would ask the question of how much of this needs to be policy-based versus procedural or schedule of fees and fines and so forth. So we're not able to discuss that right now, but I'm pointing that out to be, that's the question in my mind that I'd like people to think about maybe between now and December, and we'll start with that probably. And then lastly, we need to pop open the website policy, which is pretty involved and detailed. I doubt that we'll finish that in December, but maybe we can at least start on it. But I want to give everyone the homework between now and then. Without even looking at, sometimes I think it's useful to not get too worried about reading what's already there and tweaking it, but just sometimes start over is what's the purpose of a website policy? What are the 3 things it's supposed to achieve that we would want it to achieve? And then with that, if we agree on those purposes, then we can start looking at the existing wording and seeing what needs to change and be added and deleted and eliminated. And I would do that by, I think this is an example where there's probably either library specific or just small business in general. I'm sure there's articles out there that suggest, well, here's what you need in a website policy. And so I'm encouraging everyone to do a little homework, try and look at what else is out there in the world so that we're not reinventing the wheel. And let's start with that. The purposes, and when we pop that open, and then we'll see how far we get with that in December. So that's a heads up for next time. Any last comments, questions about roadmap, anything we've done today or anything else moving forward? Great, and you'll get an email with some of that same preview and heads up, between now and the December meeting. Okay, then I will conclude our meeting since our time is up anyways. And thanks again to everyone.
Camille and Krista, if you want to stay for the full board meeting, you have to leave and use the link to get back on. So